Hi, this is Shawn Schwaner once again, and this is the story of how I became the Hope Warrior. I'm reading from my book, Dear Mama, and I'd like to share with you Chapter 1. For those of you who don't know, this book has a great deal of violence in it. It has stories of abuse, but it also has stories of enlightenment. It has stories of hope. And by the end, you will find that you will be transformed by the notion that there is hope even in the places of darkness. So I'm going to start with what is going to be one of the most profound beginnings of a book that you've heard, and it will be unsettling, and I will tell you this, it starts with cursing. And here we go. I hope you're ready. Chapter 1, Bullets Blazing Glory. I'll kill all you motherfuckers. Bullets blazed into the descending dusk sky as old man Dank bled from the 3 holes in his back. Stumbling through the broken door, he rolled down the stairs and onto the dirt in the gravel-covered street. Stones and topsoil penetrated into his wounds as he writhed in pain. He roared out, "I'm going to kill that bitch. I'm going to kill that bitch. God damn it, I'm going to kill that fucking bitch." Mama Ladd ran through the field with her red do-rag waving in the air. Running with her newborn baby Pauline, she hurdled the cotton harvest. "Oh, it's murder, it's murder. She's going to kill everyone. Oh, it's murder." The screams faded as she disappeared into the horizon. Her ragged dress fell from her thick and blackened shoulders. "Murder, I say, murder! Please help! It's murder!" As Ariel stumbled into the stones, he yelled, "She's gone crazy! She's gone crazy! Oh, Lord, my sister's gone crazy!" On the porch, Bertha yelled, "I'll kill all you motherfuckers!" as the smoke from the gun huffed in a furious storm. Hate raged from the bowels of her despair. Repressed anger lurched into the acrimonious air as tears flowed from her stoic face. "I'll kill all you motherfuckers!" And then the gun dropped to the decaying wooden floor beneath her pristine thumb. Though the summer day preceded my biological birth by some 40 years, it set in motion a series of transformational events that redefined time in a transcendent form. Bertha Lee Green had shot her stepfather, her villain, her captor, her misery in the back, and fate changed forevermore. The meanest man in the South could no longer abuse his way to controlling the will of his unbridled stepdaughter any longer. Instead, he created a Socratic philosopher that would change the lives of all those who crossed her path. Indeed, those 3 bullets blazed through the destiny and gave me life. In the most spiritual way, our 2 souls were melded together in perpetuity that day. End of the chapter. We're on page 7. And let me just tell you from my personal experience that philosophically, when I take a look back at my life, it amazes me that such dark violence is the reason why I'm in existence today. You'll find out more. But let me continue going. Chapter 2, Blyville. Born the granddaughter of a slave, Mama Green was entrenched in a life of brutality. Forced into servitude, ragged, wretched, Mama was a giant. She carried the tenderness of a saint and wrote the original soundtrack to the School of Hard Knocks. Standing at a squat 5'4" and weighing in at a solid 260 pounds, Bertha was both intimidating and gentle. With the hands of the size of Julius Dr. J. Irving, she was a feminist in courage and strength, but a mean and take-no-prisoner street fighter by experience. Raised in a climate of omnipotent violence, Bertha was forced into a life of poverty and violation. Pundits of the Southern subcultural violence theory have evidence showing that the rates of homicide, and have been, the highest in the Deep South. The preservation of honor has been paramount to defining power and masculinity. The expression of violence has been highest in counties in which levels of economic disparity between rich and whites, poor and blacks were at the highest. Importantly, and contrary to popular opinion, patterns of homicide have been high in many rural areas, especially at the turn of the century in the Deep South. The South was built around an agrarian economy. Competition in the South was fierce, and children, especially black ones, were treated as economic assets rather than precious youth. Jim Crow segregation was legal, strong, and derisive. Black adults were forced to step off the sidewalks for young white children and relegated to subordinate positions. African Americans lived in a fear of lynching and the Ku Klux Klan assaults as many whites lived in the rural countries or counties than blacks, with a caste system built around a cotton production. Bertha Green was born into the blistering climate in 1908 in Tupelo, Mississippi. By the year 1910, before Bertha could walk, her father picked up the family and moved to Blytheville, Arkansas. Rebuilding Chicago following the destructive Great Fire of 1871 pushed the lumber industry into communities along the Mississippi River, such as Blytheville, Arkansas, to grow. In combination with a stable cotton production system, the railroads expanded to transport lumber and cotton to the northern industrial cities. The quality of the land was rich soil from centuries of overflowing Mississippi River, which drew black migrants to the area. Blytheville had a majority comprised of whites who owned the railroads, stores, and the saloons. The economy trickled upward from the black sharecroppers to the wealthy landowners. At the time, black farmers were in competition with Mexicans, quote unquote, to obtain low-skilled jobs. Sadly, and in the amalgamation of historical precedents, locals believed the Mexicans were diseased and openly hated blacks in the area. In fact, historical records show that Spanish colonists in the pre-Louisiana Purchase era spread European disease, killing off significant swaths of indigenous population. The cultural inability to see variation in the Hispanic population therefore defined all Hispanics as Mexican in the half-century wake of the Mexican-American War. Natural gas did not reach the Blytheville area until 1950, making coal and firewood the heating sources for local residents. Interestingly and sadly, the wealthy landowners during cotton harvest time created athletic competitions to see which sharecroppers could pick the most cotton in a day. White businessmen gathered in a stadium type of formation and watched the contests as blacks picked the harvest, solidifying the strong and obvious racial divide in that area. Downtown Blytheville was constructed around a disreputable saloon culture. Given the massive influx of immigrants fueling a 1,000% rate growth in the decade, the infrastructure could not keep up with the local civilian demand. Competition for jobs was cutthroat and competitive, as the rowdy nightlife, drinking, and lewd behavior lit up the night sky. Blytheville was one of the most dangerous, quote-unquote, cities in Arkansas, and Bertha, whose father died while she was a small child, was thrust into a violent, hierarchical, and deeply competitive rural environment. Given the small 27-square-mile community, there were few secrets, no hiding, and everyone knew each other. Blytheville's culture was steeped in poverty, socio-economic division, and violence, which being built around an internal economic cooperation, was lowered by coercion and corrupt political influence. The underground economic system thrived there and produced a culture of violence and suspicion. Bertha and her brother R.L. were born to their father, Mr. Franklin. Bertha was told by her mother that she was born in 1908. Shortly after R.L. was born, they moved to Tupelo, Mississippi, to Blytheville. In this context, Bertha was regarded as an economic asset and not a little girl. The consequences that attributed to her life were profound. After her father passed away, Bertha's mother, Mama Laura, sought out domestic jobs as they became available. She was strong, sturdy, humorous, and her access to competitive local job market made her valuable. At some point, she met Will Ladd, a.k.a. Mr. Dank, a bitter and tyrannical man, and they got married. He was regarded as a hypermasculine male who was fully entrenched in a competitive and violent subculture with the willingness to kill at the slightest provocation. Deeply embedded in the Blytheville saloon culture, Mr. Dank was a gambler, a drunk, and a bastard who ruled the household out of fear and violence. Bertha was forced to quit school by Mr. Dank because of her strength in cutting down trees and her victories in the annual Blytheville cotton picking contest, which earned her 25 cents per bushel. Sadly, old man Dank stole all of Bertha's hard-earned money and used it to drink and gamble, rendering her labor stolen and effectively worthless. Mr. Dank's internalization of the conflict culture justified, quote-unquote, his controlling the family members through violence and created a home of fear, humiliation, and abuse. Bertha and the other children like her were trapped in an overlap of poor external conditions and internal family strife. In the midst of the conflict, and as World War I raged, old man Dank had shot and killed a white man in downtown Blytheville for whistling at his wife, forcing him to flee into the uninhabited, Blytheville Swamp to avoid lynching, castration, or both at the hands of local Klansmen. Fearing for both their lives, Mr. Dank persuaded Mama Laura to move to Joyner, Arkansas, population 300, to avoid retaliation. Bertha's witnessing of a lynching in her youth, which ended up being the Elaine Massacre, in which 300 people were massacred by lynching, in combination with the fear of the Klan, especially with its resurgence from 1910 to 1925, created an external wall of general distrust. Further, by the 1920s, the lumber industry in the region had begun to decline. Investments in real estate by landowners was growing due to easy access to bank loans when suddenly commodity prices began to fall. The value of cotton plummeted during the late 1920s, preventing the Roaring Twenties from fully expressing itself in the region. Instead, economic hardship reigned. The Depression had reached Arkansas years before it touched the remainder of the country. The foreclosure of property and despondence of locals created a context where the underground economic system and a culture of ready aim fire proliferated. By 1932, the threat of lynching peaked and the economic devastation roared. The Great Flood of 1927 destroyed the whole entire area and sent agriculture into chaos, as most cities in northeast Arkansas were underwater for months. President Hoover called the flood the greatest peacetime disaster that was ever felt by Arkansas planters and residents in river lowlands, and it was in epic proportions. The already poor citizens of Blytheville, La Porta, and Joyner, Arkansas, places where Mama would have lived before she moved to Toledo, Ohio, were decimated. The breakdown of community structures pushing gambling, the illegal distribution of alcohol, and a blues music culture into the forefront, Blytheville jumped. Music within the tavern culture built for a dynamic social climate as Route 61 connected bluesy Memphis to St. Louis. For a time, Mama earned a living playing the piano with her brother in speakeasies from Memphis to Missouri. The Great Depression, which added economic insult to injury, forced residents to live in Red Cross tent cities as people like Mama found work with the WPA, the civilian conservation groups, and the new canning kitchens. Those who did migrate to Chicago and other northern cities found work under these federal work relief programs. Mama learned her canning skills as she worked in those kitchens, picked cotton when possible, and learned to cook as a part-time employee in local hotels. Mama always maintained her own garden and grew her own food, just in case. The government rationing cards that Mama showed me often didn't provide enough food for the family in survival. In its totality, Mama was raised in a most tumultuous, economically depraved, and violent culture, which was, sadly, all she knew. It was a place where the proverbial theory that strongest survive was actually true. Mama Green told me that she grew up in hell. In reflection, Mama's pain, ironically, was my salvation. Mama would survive and grow to become my guardian angel, even as she lives through me now. Her pain was a temple from which she fed the hungry, and I ate ravenously and freely from each place. As I grew older, she always told me, listen to your mama, and I'm doing just that right now. Her experience and placement in my life saved me from the physical aggression of a tyrant's descendant and is saving it again from the internal tyrant of anger and stolen dreams. That's the end of chapter 2. But I would just like to say from personal experience that I am who I am because a third-grade African-American woman dropped out of school, picked cotton, chopped down trees, and lived in a violent subculture in which she carried on to me messages of growth, courage, strength, and conviction. I cannot thank Bertha Green enough for what she did for me, but one thing I can say with absolute certainty. She provided me with hope, she provided me with trust, and she gave me the opportunity to love. And as I am now a professor, designing programs for metropolitan areas, I have realized that at the end of the day, the ability to find hope and build from it and establish a climate of love and trust in which we are all tied together for the same pursuits is a worthy cause. And as we move forward through this book, Dear Mama, we're going to find that even in the darkest day, there is hope. And even when there's hope, there's always a way. If you believe, if you can see, you can achieve. I thank you, Mama. We're going to have fun reading this book. I hope you enjoyed Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 of Dear Mama.